In this video, we're going to look at USB audio, which was one of the new features added to the S2400 in the latest firmware. As the name suggests, USB audio allows you to stream digital audio to and from your S2400 via USB. A note, this is only possible with USB-B. The USB host jack does not accept audio on the S2400. Firstly, let's look at recording the audio channels from your S2400 into your DAW via USB. In order to do this, we need to switch the audio system or audio interface within our DAW to the S2400. Different computer systems, Mac, PC with Mojave, Windows, Linux, etc., and different DAWs, Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase, Ableton, etc. will obviously vary, but the principle is the same as what I'm going to show you on my system. I will also later show you a setup with an iPad as another example. For now, I'm on a PC with a 64-bit operating system running Windows 10. My DAW is Cubase 11. Depending upon which computer setup you are using, the S2400 may or may not be automatically detected. In my case, when I first went into the audio system settings within Cubase, the S2400 did not appear as a device. So I installed ASIO for All, which is a free low-latency ASIO driver for Windows. Once ASIO for All was downloaded and installed, I rebooted Cubase, went to Studio Setup, and using the audio system settings at the top of the menu, I could select ASIO for All as the ASIO driver. I then selected the driver itself and clicked the Control Panel button. Within the Control Panel, I could then select the Isla Instruments S2400 from the Windows Driver Model Device list. A note here, I had to increase the buffer size on my particular system as I was getting some audio glitches with the default buffer setting. So if you experience glitches, then try increasing that. Next, I click OK to confirm the changes and then go to the Studio menu and select Audio Connections. I then make sure ASIO for All is selected as the audio device on both the inputs and outputs of my DAW. You can see that if I click on one of the inputs, I can choose from 10 channels. These are the S2400's 8 individual channels, plus the stereo bus or mix out on channels 9 and 10. There is an option to switch the mix outs to channels 1 and 2 if you desire. This will push the channel outs back to channels 3 to 10. To do this, go to the Settings menu, open the Global Settings accordion and switch USB mix order to first. I'm going to add 3 stereo buses to the one that I have so that the 8 individual channels are available to me, and I'm not going to use the mix out in this case. I've renamed them, and conveniently I can save this as a preset, so I only have to do it once. A note, the S2400's analog filters are not heard or their effect recorded over USB because USB is a digital output. The digital filters, however, will be heard and their effect recorded because they are digital. In terms of outputs, there is a stereo pair and we'll need to activate USB audio input monitoring from the input monitoring menu a little later, which I'll discuss when we get there. My S2400 is connected to my mixer via the main outputs and the speakers are connected to my mixer. I've added 8 mono tracks in Cubase and set their inputs to receive audio from the S2400's 8 channel outputs. I've then adjusted the levels to make sure nothing is clipping, and the most simple way to record is to hit record in Cubase and play on the S2400. However, I think it is preferable to have synchronization between the S2400 and your DAW, and this can work either way round, but I'm going to send MIDI clock to the S2400 from the Project Synchronization Setup menu and set the S2400's clock source to USB-B so that when I hit record in Cubase, the S2400 will start running and will sync to my DAW. To listen back to what we've recorded, we'll need to activate USB audio input monitoring on the S2400, and I'm also going to switch off MIDI clock in Cubase so that the S2400 isn't started again when I play back the recording. The reason USB audio input monitoring was switched off up until this point was to avoid feedback loops, but depending upon your setup, you may be able to leave it active. In Cubase, for example, if the track monitoring is disabled, you can leave USB audio input monitoring active without feedback loop issues. If I now play the Cubase project, it will stream over to the S2400 and be heard from its stereo out. Once you're done recording, you can of course switch your audio system back to your normal audio interface, or you may be able to use both simultaneously if your system allows you to create aggregate devices. This is generally easier on Mac than it is PC, and there is a guide on how to set it up on the Apple site and tutorials online. One final example, I'm going to connect my S2400 to my iPad using a USB-C to USB adapter. Apple devices are class compliant and so no driver should be needed, and sure enough, when I connect the S2400 whilst GarageBand is open, I get an audio device connected message and I have an option to activate monitoring. If I hit play, you can see the audio is coming in. Very simple. I could then go on to set up all the individual tracks as we did in Cubase, and under the advanced menu I can send MIDI clock to the S2400 so that it syncs with GarageBand. Next, we're going to look at sending audio to your S2400 over USB. We'll start with sampling. If you hit Shift and Sample and scroll through your sampler inputs, you will now find a USB option at the end. You can only sample at 48 kHz and 16-bit over USB, as this is a purely digital audio stream. As with your phono and jack inputs, you can set the record threshold over which the sampling will start, whether you wish to sample left only in mono, left and right mixed in mono, or stereo. There is no gain multiplier for USB audio, so it is fixed at ×1, and at the end you can set the sample time. In Cubase, I've got the S2400 set up as my audio system / interface, and so I'll set the threshold, arm record with the rec edit button, and hit play in Cubase, and the audio streams over to the S2400, where it is then sampled. Everything from this point onwards is exactly the same as has been covered in the earlier tutorial video on live looping and sampling. Speaking of live looping, we can now use USB audio with the live looper. To do this, hit Shift and Input Monitor, scroll down and make sure USB audio input monitoring is active, and then scroll right to the bottom and change the input source to USB. You can also change the input mix, output level, output channel, etc. as before. From pattern mode, hit Shift and F4 to activate the live looper, and then everything works the same, but the audio coming into the looper is streamed over USB instead of coming in from one of the analog inputs. So that concludes USB audio with the S2400.